Welcome to another episode of the Chicks on the Right program. We have been very, very anxious to talk to our guest today, Josh Hammer, who is the host of The Josh Hammer Show. He is the author of a new book, Israel and Civilization, out now. He is senior editor at large for Newsweek. And our audience may recognize Josh Hammer's name. We've mentioned it a few times during our show, because Candace Owens recently used all kinds of colorful language to describe him, including, let me see if I get them all, subhuman, filth, psychopath, deeply disturbed. And now there is this new drama regarding a word that you used in your recent Daily Mail article about Tucker Carlson, which we want to get to, but we want to backtrack a little bit and get some history, specifically starting with your relationship with Charlie Kirk and how all of this drama came to be. So can you tell us how you met and how you knew him?
Sure. So thanks for having me, first of all. I'm a big fan of the show. When I joined Newsweek as the opinion editor, so they hired me. I previously had worked for the Daily Wire. I've been a pretty public-facing conservative for my entire adult life. I've literally never been on the left. I was actually that guy in middle school and high school who was basically arguing against like 25 lib classmates on like Bush era waterboarding policies at Guantanamo Bay. I mean, that was literally me. So I've been on the right my whole life.
Alex B. Keaton, right there. Yeah.
But after Daily Wire, Newsweek hired me as a conservative to run their op-ed page, to run the opinion page, because they wanted a conservative to run the op-ed page for the very simple reason that liberals will contribute op-eds regardless, but conservatives definitely won't do it unless they know it's a hospitable location. So I say all that for context because one of the conservative columnists that I inherited at Newsweek was Charlie Kirk. And Charlie was one of our conservative columnists at Newsweek. So I got to know Charlie and also his manager, his intermediary, Andrew Colvin, who I think the world has now gone to know because Andrew is the executive producer of the Charlie Kirk Show and has been the most frequent guest host of the Charlie Kirk Show since the tragic assassination. So I got to know Charlie and Andrew quite well initially through that. Charlie first invited me to speak at a Turning Point conference about a year after I started at Newsweek. So this would have been 2021 at the Student Action Summit in Tampa. I started going on his show as a guest, even before my own show launched. And we kind of just struck up a natural chord. I am a religious Jew. He is a religious Christian. We have some obvious theological differences aside. We have a very generally similar worldview, which is that Western civilization is the offspring of the Bible and the biblical inheritance of that is the inheritance of both Jews and Christians alike. And especially over the last year or two of his life, as Charlie started to get really, really concerned with this growing sentiment of not just anti-Semitism, that's certainly part of it, but this bizarre form of right-of-center thought or commentary that seems anti-American, frankly. Anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Bible. I mean, like all the good things that I stand for, that Charlie stood for, and so on. So he became very concerned, and he formed this small WhatsApp chat, which has become the source of some speculation, shall we say. Charlie literally called this WhatsApp chat "Saving Civilization" for the very simple reason that he intended to save civilization, and he saw the pillars of that as Judaism, Christianity, the Bible, the United States, etc. there. So we talked virtually every day for the final year and a half of his life, at least in this group chat, if not privately. Most recently, I saw him in July at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit in Tampa, where I debated Dave Smith for the second time. That tragically ends up being Charlie Kirk's final event that he ever moderated at a Turning Point USA conference, which is obviously horrific in hindsight. Then I saw him about 3 weeks, give or take, after that at another event that's become the source of some sort of conspiracy. This was the Hamptons retreat. This was the Turning Point USA Hamptons retreat, the one where Bill Ackman attended, my good friend Seth Dillon, the Babylon Bee. I was there. That was the last time that I saw Charlie in person, because that was about a month before the horrific assassination. So that's kind of the whole story there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amy, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say, you talk about how there's a rise in anti-Semitism. I also think that there's been a rise in Islamism, and that concerns me, because it's almost as if people can't see what's happening in Europe. And I don't understand why they can't see it. I mean, we've been doing this for the better part of 18 years. So we're old. And so and when I say old, it's when you're older, because you're a young guy. I mean, not to diminish, like, because you have done some stuff. I mean, you're very accomplished, but we've been in this space for a long time to see that, like, it is It is very concerning when we do see the anti-Semitism, but we also do see a rise of the Islamism, which is, you'd think that people would look at other places and go, that's probably not a good idea based on what I'm seeing happening over there, not being a good idea. So we don't want it to happen here. And so there's a mix of things going on. And I see like this huge fracture happening in the party because we've always been like, we're really bad at rallying as conservatives. We're bad at coming together because we're very individualistic. We don't like to go along to get along. But we've, complained about that over the past better part of 20 years, how we're not good ralliers. And I feel like in 2024, I finally feel like we got to a place where we're like, okay, I think we're getting there. So it's going to be great. We're starting to like gain some momentum. And then it was like, wah, 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 wah. And here we are. We're back again.
And fighting.
Worse than ever, Josh, because I feel like there's this massive fracture happening and I'm legit terrified of it because I think it's the worst we've ever seen in the better part of 2 decades. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Look, I mean, on the one hand, the American right, the American conservative movement has had plenty of policy and intellectual and philosophical disagreements since that modern movement. The tale that is told about the modern conservative movement typically goes back to the 1950s with the rise of National Review and Bill Buckley and the Heritage Foundation. So I mean, going back to those early post-World War II debates, there have been all sorts of philosophical disagreements between the Cold War era interventionists and the old school, Taft-style isolationists. On the one hand, you have the libertarians, the laissez-faire fundamentalists versus kind of the social conservatives. So these disagreements, to an extent, are somewhat endemic, for better or for worse, to the American right. To an extent, that's actually not a bad thing, right? Because you do want a healthy, you want a healthy intellectual vibrancy. The problem is that that's not what we're seeing. I agree. Yeah. The problem is that what we're seeing right now is not that. This is not too well-read, well-informed, amicably disagreeing conservatives, having a policy disagreement about the Cuban Missile Crisis or what the tax rate should be or this or no. I mean, what you're seeing is the rise of a strand of people who think of themselves as being on the right and occasionally talk of themselves as being on the right, but as I was saying, I mean, seem to not just be anti-Semitic. In many ways, they're actually anti-Christian. I mean, look at what Tucker Carlson said on his show to Nick Fuentes. He said that he detests no one more, I think, on earth. I think I could be wrong. I don't want to be misquoted.
No, you're right.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So he said he detests no one more on earth than Christian Zionists.
And that's me.
That's a pretty shocking statement. I mean,
that's a lot of people. He hates a lot of people.
It's Charlie.
It's literally Charlie.
Yeah.
Literally to a T, Charlie. Charlie posted a photo of himself shortly after October 7th of him praying at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, wearing the kippah, the Jewish skull cap, literally quoting Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, one of the most cited verses of the Bible for Christian Zionists, in Parsha Lech Lecha, which we're actually going to read in synagogue this Shabbat. It's kind of funny timing. And this is a famous line where it says, "I shall bless those who bless you, I shall curse those who curse you." I mean, that was Charlie's MO. I mean, he was a literal Christian Zionist. So Tucker is bashing Charlie. He's also bashing a plurality, at least, of the MAGA coalition, of the Republican voting base there.
Yep.
And these ceaseless attacks on not just the tiny minority that are us Jews, but also this broader majority that are proud Christians, proud patriotic constitutionalist Americans, just good old-fashioned people of by and for the right. On the other hand, you have, Tucker... You mentioned Islamism. Tucker had a really bizarre video a few months ago where he's offering apologia on behalf of Sharia law. He has this video where he's talking about Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, UAE. He's like, these are beautiful looking cities. I mean, how bad can Sharia law be? On the other hand, he's giving a puff interview to the president of Iran, to the Emir of Qatar. I mean, what is going on here? I mean, are we, as Charlie would have put it, are we on team civilization or are we not? I mean,
yeah.
So are you? I mean, with the chat that you talked about, and you obviously you don't have to disclose who else is involved other than you and now Andrew and whoever else. Do you talk to him and to the others at TPUSA about because there's a lot of people right now calling for TPUSA to essentially distance themselves from Tucker. Do you believe that they should? Are they aware of how much chatter there is about how different Tucker is from what Charlie stood for, and whether or not that harms the TPUSA brand?
Charlie was an adamant foe of Nick Fuentes. No one in America did more to sideline Nick Fuentes and that whole movement than Charlie Kirk. Literally no one more. There's not a single person who did more to ostracize Fuentes than Charlie. I mean,
and there's video proof of it, Josh.
Yes.
Like, you can see where he hated the ideology of this guy. And if people don't believe it, you can see it with your own eyes. You can watch him say that you can see him visibly irritated and agitated and disgusted at these people.
Right. I mean, Fuentes would literally show up physically to these conferences to troll Turning Point into trying to let him attend. He caused personal hell for Charlie and his now widow, Erica. And the difference is that Charlie, like many of us in this space, knew Tucker for a very long time. And he had years and years of very positive experiences with Tucker, of him speaking at the conferences back when he was slightly more normal, when he was on Fox News and so forth there. And he just never got to the point where he saw Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes as being in the same camp. And I do think that he would have been shocked, shocked if he had seen that a month and a half after his death, that Tucker would bring on Nick Fuentes for what can only be described as a very friendly interview.
Oh, yeah.
A very friendly interview there. But yes, I mean, the folks Charlie and the folks in his orbit were certainly aware that I was not a fan of the direction that Tucker Carlson had taken, that I think a lot of folks were not a fan of the direction Tucker Carlson had taken. But there were all these years of very pleasant personal interactions that I think kind of just led him to say, it can't be right. I mean, it just can't be the case that Tucker is, indistinguishable from Fuentes there, or he's peddling a slightly softer, more toned down, more faculty lounge-esque version of the Fuentes bile and filth. So, that was one thing that we disagreed about. But here's where I will say that Charlie and I very much agree. We agreed very strongly on two things. One, a lot of things to be clear, but two things for present purposes. One is that genuine, actual anti-Semitism, not like a disagreement about like foreign aid to Israel, but like literal, actual old school blood libel anti-Semitism has no place on the right, period, full stop, end of story. There is an infinite supply of internet clips available for Charlie saying exactly that, including in my debate against Dave Smith on the stage at Turning Point just in July. The other thing that I think is even more relevant, possibly, that Charlie stood for, that I agree with as well, is that when it comes to platforming decisions, who you're going to choose to platform at a conference, so forth there, lines at some point have to be drawn. Again, Charlie keeping out Fuentes was like the literal embodiment of that. Now, he and I disagreed at times, as I'm sure he disagreed with any number of his other friends and colleagues and whatever. We all have our own ideas as to where exactly to draw the line every instance there. But the point is that lines must be drawn. And to simply draw a line is not an act of cancellation. It is a basic...
Exactly.
It is one, an editorial judgment. I mean, for instance, a pro-life organization would obviously not platform a pro-abortion speaker at their conference. So it's just an editorial judgment. Two, it's also just like a literal, time of how many minutes of the day. I mean, a conference can't go on for life. You have a limited time there, limited slots. It's a scarcity of resources thing, too. So he strongly agreed on lines being drawn for platforming, and I very much agree with that as well, certainly.
Yeah, and I think, and it's the mainstreaming that concerns me too.
Yes.
Because since that line has not been drawn, and you've got people like Tucker interviewing this guy, which the whole groyper, God, I hate that word, the whole groyper movement, these, now he's getting a platform. So people can say, people like Tucker be like, well, I mean, it's just, it's free speech. I'm just hearing what he has to say. I'm paraphrasing, of course. All these people are like, what's the big deal? Just hearing what they have to say. But when you give him a platform, you're going to have all these really super right-wing people that are awful. Like the far, far right wing that are just terrible, terrible white nationalists. When I say white nationalists, I'm talking about like the legit white supremacists, anti-Semitic, horrible people that are like, oh yeah, I really like this guy.
He sounds really nice because there's been no pushback. Nothing.
Just real quick, not to cut you off, but Fuentes is obviously a literal Holocaust denier. I mean, there was an infamous clip of the cookies. Okay, but he's also like a scathing racist. I mean, he's
totally.
mocked JD Vance for marrying his wife Usha because she's Indian. I've met Usha before. She's a wonderful, wonderful, amazing, accomplished.
He's anti-all
woman.
immigration. He doesn't. I mean, like we are anti-illegal immigration, obviously, but he doesn't like any immigration, which mocks parents. Like, I mean, hello, that.
But also just like literally like anti-black, anti-Indian, like profoundly like misogynist, anti-woman. I mean, he's just a bad human being. I really don't know how to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm curious because you mentioned JD and Usha, and you probably saw the TPUSA event at Ole Miss last night. I've seen a lot of interesting takes from very pro-Israel Jewish people who are dissatisfied with how JD Vance answered some of the questions that related to Israel and to this, this ridiculous idea that Bibi Netanyahu controls Donald Trump or Israel controls Donald Trump. But there was that one question in particular where the student asked about the ethnic genocide in Gaza and I can't remember how he phrased it, but it was something to the extent about there's inability for Judaism and Christianity to coexist well. And so why is the United States paying any mind to Israel? And I thought JD's answer was tactful and diplomatic and politically fine. And I love him. I think he's a phenomenal potential choice for 2028. But I am seeing a lot of folks who I was surprised to see who are very disappointed and disillusioned by the way that he answered that question. What was your take?
Let me first address part of like that interlocutor's question, then I'll come back to JD. So part of that question, as you correctly summarized it, was this notion that Judaism and Christianity cannot coexist. So this is a topic that I address at great length, actually, in my book, Israel and Civilization, because no one can understand the story of the United States of America. Literally, no one can understand this country without understanding just how much our very pious, very devout Christian founders were inspired by the Hebrew Bible, by the Old Testament, by the Jewish people and Jewish ethical, legal, political, and norms. I mean, what's inscribed on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia? It's not Aristotle in Nicomachean Ethics. It's not a speech from Cicero on the floor of the Roman Senate. It's literally the book of Leviticus. I mean, like as Old Testament as it gets. It's Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10. This exhortation to spread liberty throughout the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. I mean, Benjamin Franklin wanted the national seal of the United States to literally be Moses crossing the Red Sea with the Israelites trailing behind. John Adams, our second president and a very devout Christian himself, famously once says that it's his contention that no people in the history of mankind has done more to civilize the masses than the Hebrew people, because they introduced to the world the concept of monotheism. So, this notion that the Jews and Christians can't get along is completely belied by the American founding and by nearly 2.5 centuries now of the American story. So I just wanted to kind of get that in there. But look, when it comes to J.D. Vance in particular, my Jewish friends are something. My Jewish friends on the right, to be clear, I don't really have a whole lot of friends on the left in general these days. But I have some, not a ton. But my Jewish friends on the right are somewhat divided when it comes to J.D. Vance. I've personally known JD for some years now, since well before he was Senator Vance. I think we met at the first National Conservatism Conference, the first NatCon, way back in D.C. in 2019. We were following each other back when we just had, 10, 20,000 Twitter followers or whatever there. I've gotten dinner and drank beers with him and his wife, Usha. So I personally like the guy very much. I think very highly of him. It's definitely concerning that Tucker Carlson's son, Buckley, is in his office. I mean, I'm not going to mince words and pretend that is just something to glance over. It's definitely a potential red flag. On the other hand, one of my close law school friends is in that office. The chief of staff of Vice President Vance this is all public information, is a proud Jew. Another friend of mine named Jacob Reese. So, I mean, this notion that J.D. Vance is some, crypto-groyper anti-Semite, I think is nuts. And there's really no evidence to back that up. I mean, could he have handled that question or something else slightly differently. Look, there was one question kind of implying, you know, that like Israel and the Jews control American foreign policy. And his answer was basically like, well, obviously they don't control this president. Look, if I'm really nitpicking, like a better answer would have been, I reject the premise of the question. I mean,
exactly right.
But I'm nitpicking a little bit here, okay? I mean, as someone who has done these events before, when you're in like that moment, you don't always say like exactly the best thing there. So
Totally.
I mean, he overall did a perfectly fine job. I am not particularly worried that JD Vance is a crypto-groyper. I will say this though. I will say this despite my personal fondness towards him and everything. Tucker is a massive problem, okay? And at some point, the palling around with Tucker Carlson, I think, is not going to be an issue not just for Jews like me, but it is increasingly becoming a politically untenable albatross in general. Like literally just for the American people. I mean, as we just discussed, Tucker Carlson, who I guess the vice president still considers a friend, Tucker was just calling all Christian Zionists essentially scum of the earth. I mean, that is a lot of Trump Vance's own voters. So this is rapidly becoming unsustainable and politically untenable. And I hope and pray that JD Vance ultimately takes the right and prudent course of action there. I think he will, for what it's worth.
And I think it's going to be a huge problem in the next election, which he will ultimately be a big part of. Obviously, he's going to be the guy running for president. I think. So, I mean, what do you think will happen if he runs and if he's got, because this is going to be looming. This whole you are a Zionist. This is what we get this all the time on our socials. I hate that. I don't like the word Zionist. To me, I have never heard that word so much as I have in the past 2 years. You know what I mean? Like I said, we've been doing this for a long time. It's like that and the word genocide. I feel like I've heard those two words more in the past 2 years than. It's insane, but
well, Zionism in theory is a very simple and quite beautiful concept. I mean,
it is.
I mean,
it is. But they've made it bad.
Correct. They've bastardized it. They've made it a pejorative. But I mean, literally, the first 5 books of the Bible, what we call the Torah, what Christians just know as the Pentateuch, the first 5 books there. I mean, I would argue it's essentially a Zionist document, really. Right? I mean, a large part of the story is the Jewish people finding their way to the land of Israel. I mean, that's a large part of the story of the first 5 books of the Bible there. That seems pretty Zionist to me. So it's not a particularly shocking concept, but you're totally right. The left has hijacked this word as they have so many others.
And some of the right. I mean, I'm delighted to be called a Zionist. I'm fine with it. I'm happy with it. Delighted. But what really bothers me is that like on especially like Instagram, because I run our Instagram, you would not believe the amount of conservatives that come out there and they're like, you Zionist, and they say it in such a derogatory manner. And then they'll be like, you got your $7,000, you got this. They'll accuse us of being paid, which I would be delighted to be paid by Israel too. I mean, I'm happy to take a check, happy to do it. But I mean,
we're already saying the things.
I mean, we will always support Israel. We're happy to take a check. I mean, if anybody's listening. But this is the thing: is that we get so hit for that. Like people they beat up on us for that, and I'm like, this is the weirdest place to be right now as a conservative pundit who is a Christian Zionist. I guess that's what I am. I've just always been a Christian who supports the Jews, I guess. I love Jewish people and it's just a bizarre place to be. And so I feel like this is going to be a place of fracture in the next election like we've never seen before, because when you mention the Tucker thing and when you mention and you bring up the fact that he is basically saying that we are scum of the earth, that's going to be a problem because he's very influential. That's going to be an issue, I believe.
Look, I wish that it's kind of funny because a lot of the anti-Israel folks say, I'm fine with Israel, but I wish we never talked about it. Basically, that we talked about it far less. Guess what? I literally agree with that. I literally agree that we talked about it far less. In fact, when I started to write the draft proposal for my long overdue first book 2.5 years ago now, it had nothing to do with this. It was a totally unrelated book about generally kind of, my vision for conservative governance and, domestic policy, et cetera there. And the only reason that I switched gears entirely was not necessarily October 7th, but the world's reaction to October 7th. I was like, oh my God, I mean, this is truly insane. I've got to try to fight back there. And personally, the reason that I've spoken a lot more about this issue probably over the past 2 years is just due to the fact that there is just so much animus and so much hatred. So I can only speak for myself, but I don't feel like I am doing the over talking. I feel like the other side is doing like the over talking, and we're kind of just playing defense over here, frankly.
Yes.
So, it saddens me certainly that this issue has become so divisive in American politics in general. Look, I mean, on the other hand, I don't want to over-exaggerate, right? So even at that Turning Point USA conference in July, the one where I debated Dave Smith, Charlie and his team did a poll of the whole audience, roughly 4,000 people, give or take. They're predominantly younger folks there, but many activists. And 73% called themselves pro-Israel, for whatever it's worth. Now,
great.
We can quibble and say that 73% probably would have been 90% a decade ago, which it probably would have been. But that's still a healthy majority. And, the 27%, the ones who are not, maybe are a little more vulgar and crude, such as this interlocutor of J.D. Vance's at the Oxford, Mississippi event, where he's talking about ethnic cleansing there. And no doubt about it that we have a bit of a problem when it comes to Fuentes and that whole crew, that whole crowd more generally there. But, overall, when it comes to these specific issues, because, look, I mean, in the American political valence, where you stand on the Jews is just a proxy of where you stand on religion and the biblical inheritance more generally, which is ultimately a proxy for where you stand really on America. So,
Right.
I mean, the right is still in a much healthier place on these issues than the left, which is like, decades and decades and decades gone. So I don't want to overstate just how bad it has gotten, but it's definitely considerably worse than it was as recently as like 5 years ago there, and we have a lot of work to do.
I want to just go back to the Candace stuff for a minute, because I know that you appeared on Erin Milan's show and talked, that was right after she twisted this tweet of yours about public executions to make it sound as if you were predicting what happened to Charlie, even though it was clear to anybody with like actual brains that you were referring to what everybody was referring to, which was Irina Zarutska. So you had mentioned on that show, and we're very curious about this because you do have you're a lawyer by trade. Are you still pursuing a lawsuit? Pretty please. Because like, I just, the way that your words get misconstrued, it just makes me rage. And it's the same thing that's happening with your piece in the Daily Mail today.
With
it's
the neutralizing,
insane.
right? The neutralizing thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pure unmitigated anti-Semitism. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, if someone who was not wearing a kippah was, tweeting about the execution of Irina Zarutska's murderer, or talking about neutralizing a political thread, whatever. I mean, no one would even think twice about what he or she meant. So. Look, to answer your question directly, I am a lawyer by background. I clerked in a federal court of appeals. I've written pieces of constitutional scholarship. I've spoken to top law schools. I know a thing or two about the First Amendment and defamation law. So based on all of my own understanding, based on my own discussions with lawyers, there absolutely is a potentially viable defamation case to be had against Candace Owens. I'm not initiating a lawsuit at this exact time for various reasons that have nothing to do with the legal strength, which is very strong. But to kind of tantalize you and leave you a little bit on the hooks there, the statute of limitations for a defamation claim in the state of Florida, where I live, is 2 years. So there's plenty of time to kind of think this through a little more and see what else she perhaps has to say in the future.
We would highly encourage that.
Well, and that actually leads to another question that is sort of lawyery, I guess, for lack of a better word. She recently slapped Nathan Livingstone, who clipped some of her book club videos and demonstrated like how psycho she sounded in those. And she hit him with one of those like copyright takedown notices. So we talked about this on our show because I heard the people that were like, well, clearly that was behind a paywall, so he didn't have a right to clip it and share it. But then other folks were saying that's obviously fair use because he was providing commentary. What is your take on that?
So I have no real legal take, to be honest with you. Intellectual property law, copyright, trademark, fair uses, that's just like genuinely not my area, to be honest with you. So I know very little about it. My vague impression is that the paywall is not legally significant in this case, that when you are a figure of Candace Owens' stature and you're putting content on the internet, it probably is fair use, but that's my very kind of general vague instinct. I feel bad for Nathan Livingstone, who does a lot of good work when it comes to exposing, Candace and frankly a lot of this, anti-Western civilization crap out there. But I don't have kind of any particular legal expertise in that, to be honest with you.
Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
And then one other question that goes back to the group text, another thing that you were taken out of context for and attacked for mercilessly, you had explained, I thought in a way that made perfect sense, that Charlie's comment about inviting Candace to TPUSA and Vance and him abandoning the Israel cause, I thought your explanation made so much sense because you know him. The people in your chat know him, knew his heart, and yet she took that and just absolutely ran with it. Can you just contextualize that conversation a bit more?
Sure. So this was the day before Charlie's horrific, unconscionable assassination. To an extent, by the way, it still feels kind of surreal, honestly. I mean, I still feel like this was a nightmare. I'm going to wake up and it's just not the case. So the day before, on September 9th, I guess that would have been, Charlie found out that one of his major donors, who happens to be a Jew and very pro-Israel, was pulling a $2 million a year donation out of frustration with the platform of Tucker Carlson, and maybe more generally just kind of the way that the organization was headed. I don't really know it, but I think it was probably mostly related to Tucker. Look, two things here can be true at once, as I said in this post that you're referring to. On the one hand, no one has a right to a donation. If you operate a 501c3, 501c4, whatever, you have to maintain those relations. I mean, to kind of go back to the abortion analogy, if you are a donor to a pro-life organization, and then that pro-life organization at its major gala or conference has a notable pro-partial birth abortion speaker, you're going to stop donating. I mean, this is a very reasonable thing to do there. So every donor has to look out for his or her best checkbooks. I mean, money is a limited resource there. There's a lot of organizations that fight the good fight, so to speak, there. So the donor is entitled to do whatever he wants. Charlie, as the former CEO of Turning Point, is obviously entitled to react to whoever he wants to as well. And this is a large donor. He has every right to be frustrated over that there. Frankly, sure. I think I would have been too probably there. So this was a close group chat where, we kind of just, say things with the expectation that these things would be kept private, by the way. I mean, that's kind of how group chats work. There's no expectation that there will be screenshots and leaks or any kind of shenanigans like that. And, he was frustrated. The notion that he was actually going to invite Candace is insane. He was obviously not going to invite Candace Owens. He was really frustrated. He was like, oh, I might as well just invite Candace at this point there.
Right. He
was frustrated. And part of that frustration was Charlie was genuinely frustrated with how Israel defended itself over the course of the 2-year war. We saw these frustrations
which he made
play
clear
out.
With the letter to Bibi. He was very clear about that.
Exactly. And I read that letter back in June or July. His team gave me access to it. And it was a fantastic letter. I agreed with basically every word, I think. I mean, essentially the whole thing. Which, by the way, the very first line of that letter began, as a Christian, one of my greatest joys in life is befriending Jewish people and defending the state of Israel. So, I mean, talk about someone who Tucker Carlson actually considers to be the scum of the earth, right?
Right.
And anyway, the relevant point about this exchange you're talking about there the day before his murder is that happened around 3:30, 4 p.m. in the afternoon Eastern time, if I remember the timestamp correctly. 2 hours after that, at 6 p.m. Eastern time, we had a little Zoom call that Charlie himself organized between me, our mutual friend, Rabbi Pesach Walicki, who lives in Jerusalem. He used to be on the, on a lot of shows, or maybe he still is. I mean, he was kind of a figure in right-wing media. So it was me, Rabbi Walicki, a couple of Charlie's producers, and Charlie. And the entire purpose of this 1-hour Zoom call was he wanted to have this call the day before he began his national campus tour, because he wanted to make sure that he had all of the right talking points, the right way to communicate how to best defend the Jewish people and the U.S.-Israel relationship. So we talked about how do I respond to accusations of genocide? How do I respond to accusations of famine? How do I respond to accusations of two-state solution, one-state solution? We kind of spent an hour kind of going issue by issue. Here's how I respond there. And he was really pleased with how that meeting went. And in this post that you're referring to, where I I kind of hate the whole screenshot game. It just feels really icky. I mean, especially with like a dead friend. I mean, it's horrific. But in the interest of clearing my own name, if nothing else, I took this screenshot of Charlie, then messaging like an hour or two, whatever, after that Zoom call, saying like, "Thank you guys for the call, super helpful," which were actually the last messages that he ever sent to that group chat. So again, someone who was like literally turning on Israel would not have had that Zoom call the night before his national campus tour began for the express purpose, making sure that he had all of the best answers possible to respond to the outpouring of anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism on college campuses.
Why are people not? I mean, people are making this so much more complicated and seedy and conspiratorial than it needs to be, and I will never understand it. And I actually don't understand. And maybe you have perspective about this. Like, is there a reason that the folks at TPUSA, including Andrew and Blake and the rest of them, are being so cagey about not directly calling out what she is saying? I mean, is it because the investigation is ongoing? Because I mean, they do, reply to some of it, I guess, but they never name her. They never just call her out directly, and I don't really understand it.
Well, your first question, that you don't understand why this is, why people are kind of muddying the waters when it seems so clear. There's a very simple answer for that, which is that Jews are involved. I mean, this is all part. It's very ugly stuff. This is all part of an insidious effort after the assassination of his entire generation's leading Christian Zionists to try to paint him as turning on the Jews, as not a friend to the Jews, therefore trying to redefine his legacy for future generations, as well as shape and steer the direction of Turning Point USA. That's the entire purpose here. That is the entire reason that they're all doing this. That's the entire reason that the conspiracists are saying that Israel killed Charlie Kirk, and Candace said that I did, and that's the whole that's the whole reason. That's the whole reason that they're trying to paint Charlie as something other than what he was, which was a bridge builder between Jews and Christians, between the U.S. and Israel, communities of faith, and on and on and on. So that's the first part of the question. As far as why Turning Point has thus far not issued many, if any, definitive statements, I obviously can't speak for Turning Point. I don't get paid by Turning Point. I think they should. I'll be very candid with you. I think that would be helpful. I certainly would have welcomed some sort of ammunition, some sort of definitive statements when I was kind of in the throes of Candace Owens's digital jihad against me a few weeks ago. That would that would have been nice. By the way, it's not just me. I mean, she had a recent episode about Mikey McCoy.
Unbelievable.
Like the nicest guy in the world. I mean, his father, Pastor Rob, was Charlie's spiritual mentor. I mean, she's gone after Andrew as well. So she's gone after a lot of folks. Erica Kirk as well. I mean, so they definitely have grounds well beyond little Josh Hammer to go and, defend their name, defend their integrity against this. As to exactly why they're not doing so, I couldn't exactly tell you, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because she's not just redefining his legacy. She's trying to redefine him as a person.
Yeah.
And that is like, if I were his wife, I would be swinging. Oh, I'd be so mad, Josh. You know what I mean? And if a friend, so I mean, we have questions. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason why they're not, because I would be old school on this.
Well, I think the organization is just in a bit of flux, probably in a bit of turmoil, to be honest with you.
I mean, get it. True.
They just lost the guy who was the organization. I mean, Erica Kirk has been named the new CEO, chairman, whatever her exact titles are, and she spoke at the Ole Miss event last night, but I mean, she's also the grieving widow with two young children,
which makes it all that much more cruel.
It does. It is cruel, Mock. It is.
It's just
all of
awful.
It's just disgusting, is what it is. It's all so gross, and yeah,
it is. So okay. So final question before we let you go, unless Amy Jo, if you have something else, jump in.
I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good.
All right. So the question is about your Daily Mail piece about Tucker and this whole controversy that's been blown up about your word of the word that you used, neutralize the fox in the hen house. because we've been trying to, I mean, to me, it's just like you posted the definition that you used. It was the very first definition, the most commonly used definition. Not sure why people are making this a thing, but they are. Looking back, would you choose a different word now, or do you just think this is absolute insanity that people are assuming once again that you are somehow in on executions and like murdering people?
Well, yes to both your questions. I mean, it is obviously beyond absurd. I mean, the Daily Mail is one of the largest newspapers in the UK. It's probably one of the largest newspapers in the Western world. There were at least 3 different editors at the Daily Mail who read this column. No one even batted an eyelash over this, for the very simple reason that to someone with more than 1 or 2 brain cells, this should be really obvious. So that is just clearly true. And the corollary to that is that whether it's Candace or Dave Smith or all these usual actors there, they are willfully and disingenuously distorting and warping my words, because it all has an agenda. And the agenda, let's be very clear about it. The agenda is nothing less than to kick Jews out of MAGA, to kick Jews out of the American right. Frankly, if you really want to extrapolate even further, I think what a lot of these people really desire is to kick the Jews out of America. To actually have like a Queen Isabella, 1492 style, edict of expulsion of the Jews, but at a bare minimum, get them out of MAGA. That is clearly what is motivating a lot of these particularly irksome, insidious actors, and that is definitely what is behind this clearly orchestrated outrage campaign on me yet again. On the other hand, yes, I mean, if I knew this was coming, I obviously would have used a different word, of which there are many. But I mean, just to say the obvious, I don't think this audience needs to hear this. A fox in a hen house is a very well-known metaphor in the English language. It's like speaking of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're not literally talking about killing 2 birds. It's a very, very common way of speaking. And to speak of neutralizing the threat after my op-ed just spoke of Tucker as having as his goals not just the belittling of Jews and evangelical Christians, but also the obliteration of MAGA itself, which is my actual thesis there. That's why he's a threat, because I think he's a threat not just to Jews, not just to evangelicals, not just to Christian Zionists, but to literally MAGA itself. So you neutralize that threat when the threat is in the form of influence and policy ideas and general worldview. And the way you do that is you have a battle of ideas within the right. Okay, I'm talking here about an intra-right battle of ideas, and how I hope, indeed I pray, that the forces of sanity within the broader right prevail over the forces of insanity. That is how you neutralize an intellectual or philosophical threat. That's obviously what I meant. And frankly, anyone interpreting to the contrary is a genuine moron and or willfully disingenuous. It's probably a lot more of the latter than the former, but despite all that, yes, of course I would have used some other synonym in hindsight.
These are the same people, though, who have no problem with the absolutely disgusting filth that comes out of Nick Fuentes' mouth.
Right. So I mean, like
Dave Smith is happy to platform that guy.
They're trying to tone police a certain verb at literally the last sentence of my op-ed, while on the other hand, if you object to Tucker platforming Fuentes, then you're accused yourself of tone policing. I mean, square that circle for me.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's like, Stalin is great.
Right. I mean,
Tucker's like, yeah, that's
it.
Awesome.
All just seems so crazy.
Everything's upside down. I can't.
Yeah. Josh, thank you. You've cleared up a lot for us. We wanted to give you an opportunity to sort of make your case, because we try to do it alongside of you on Twitter, because we see the attacks. We know how baseless and ridiculous they are. We don't understand why people just don't absorb the most common sense, simplest explanations for things. But this is where we are now. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.